Swallowtail, Chapter 7. Claire peeked out of the flowers into an enormous meadow lit by tiny royal blue wildflowers. She spotted Alma beneath an ancient oak, covered in something white. Snow? Alma's intimidating voice filled Claire's head before she'd even emerged from the flowers. "Dear child, what have you been into? Your vibration is as heavy as marble. You cannot meet, let alone communicate with your collective in this state," Alma scolded her. Claire shuffled through the grass toward the tree. When she'd almost reached her, she blinked as clouds of little white butterflies flew out of Alma's chest, and she began doing some form of tai chi. Bright streams of pink light trailed from her fingertips like the afterglow of sparklers. The two of them stood beneath the tree in silence for what could have been several minutes or several days. Claire never knew anymore. Guilt finally got the best of her. Tony needed help. I just gave him a hint and he got it. I'm sure he did. But he might have found it on his own had you exercised some self-control. Now we'll never know. That's his path you're manipulating. It's not to trifle with. You've altered his course. The bright pink light trailing from Alma's fingertips turned dark purple with her lecture, and was well on its way to a smoldering gray. Claire glowered and sat down in the grass. Shame turned to anger. Alma wouldn't even look at her, an awfully passive-aggressive course for someone so enlightened. He was just so close. I need my friends and family to know what happened to me. I can help Tony piece it all together, get him to figure out who I am and contact them. Who you were, Claire. No, Alma, who I am. I'm still their mother. I'm still a wife, a friend, a daughter. Alma sighed, dropped her hands to her sides, and turned to Claire. In the beginning, it is a form of comfort, but one can become quite ill hovering over loved ones. And before you know it, you are trying to control everyone and everything, and completely obsessed with the past. You are haunting all the inhabitants of your former life. Inhabitants? The people I love? People who love me, my children? For God's sake. Calm yourself. It was a poor choice of words. Even I am allowed a transgression now and then. But it is imperative that you understand it only complicates their paths and slows evolution. It slows your evolution as well as theirs. Her voice was calm despite the darkening of the entire meadow. But I am helping them, Claire insisted. She got to her feet and folded her arms. Her jeans and t-shirt felt comfortingly real again. She nervously wound her big toe around a clump of grass and felt like a child for protesting. But it was the truth. She was not going to settle for being a memory when she could still bring them some peace. She had to try. And she was willing to fight anyone now, even Alma. Back to the farm with you, then. With a wave of Alma's hand, Claire was swept backward and found herself standing in Nana's front yard. Nice, Alma. Am I grounded or what? Claire shouted. She raked her fingers through her hair and wandered inside the old barn. The air felt cool as Claire climbed the ladder into the hayloft. A blanket lay on some bales of hay. She sprawled out on it, her thoughts gravitating to Paul. He would have seen her point. She missed talking to him about everything. She missed his touch and his laugh. She missed spooning with him, watching old movies in bed. Claire closed her eyes and imagined herself spooned snugly against his body. I know, Lynn, she heard Paul whisper. He had the phone sandwiched between his face and the pillow, shivering as he pulled the covers up under his chin. They're going to say all kinds of things about her, rotten things. But you and I both know she would never do anything like that. We're talking about a woman who's always put everything right back where she found it, in the store. Always put her card away, said it was good karma. They'll find her soon, and this whole nightmare will be over. I still say she might have had some sort of breakdown after Julia disappeared with all that money. They were close. Her cubicle was right next to Julia's office. He paused, allowing Lynn to rant and sob, then continued when she stopped to catch her breath. I know, I didn't care for her either, but she made Claire laugh and seemed like a good friend sometimes. Honestly, I don't know what they had in common. I think she must have served as entertainment more than anything. Paul paused again, his eyes closed. Come on, Lynn. You and I both know she had nothing to do with the embezzlement. We've got to hang in there and keep our heads on straight. I've got all kinds of contacts through the hospital. We're making hundreds of calls every day. I just know we'll find her recuperating somewhere. In the meantime, we have to stay sane for each other and for the girls. You've got to. Go easy on the sugar. You're making it hard on yourself being so emotionally up and down like this, he pleaded. Don't go there, Paul. I wouldn't wish this on anyone ever, Lynn warned. Claire felt weak for the first time since she'd left the Earth plane, but it was more than that. She could feel them draining her energy with their hopelessness. She could still hear her mother sobbing on the other end of the line, and she thought her heart would break, but she couldn't think herself to her. Not now. It's just too much to deal with. She couldn't even bear to stay with Paul much longer. One at a time. I need someone open, more hopeful. Paul hung up the phone, and Claire pulled herself up close to him again and held his face in her hand. The more she clung to him, the harder he cried and the weaker she felt. He shook with great heaving sobs until she couldn't take it anymore. He wanted her mother to believe she was alive, to not give up hope of ever seeing her again, because he already had. He's lost all hope. She'd never seen him like this. It frightened her. She placed her hand over his heart in one last attempt to calm him. Paul cried out. Claire tore herself from him in anguish. It's pointless. I can't reach him. She had to find someone who could get through to him. There was only one other person Paul had always listened to, even when they disagreed. Gus. Unfortunately, Paul's father, Gus, had slipped deeply into the clutches of Alzheimer's years ago. Claire thought of Gus's birthday party a few months earlier. How he'd shrieked with joy and clapped his hands like a little boy when they'd brought out the gifts and a chocolate cake lit with candles. That had been one of his good days. Gus had lived in a nursing home for several years. His wife, Lily, passed from pneumonia shortly after his diagnosis. He'd declined rapidly. Gus no longer knew Em or Anna or any of his friends. But he did still recognize Paul and Claire sometimes. Claire was surprised by how easily she thought herself to Gus's bedside, just through memories of the party. He lay on his back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He was singing Moon River, but the same line over and over, like a skip in a record. Claire sat and listened to him until his fifth time through. Then she telepathically interrupted. Hi, Gus. He stopped singing, then started up again. Claire tried again, this time shouting the thought. Hi, Gus. He paused and whispered. Lily, darling. Shit, way to go. She didn't want to make him more miserable, but she needed his help. Maybe I can help Gus too, in ways I couldn't before. No, that's Claire, silly, said a voice. Claire whipped around to see her mother-in-law sitting in a rocking chair. We used to dance to Moon River all the time. It's my favorite. Lily, Claire shrieked, reaching out to her. Lily joined her on the bed and gave her a long hug. You sure are a sight for sore eyes. Did you see my little blue butterflies following Em in the park? Lily asked excitedly. I did. That was you. Thank you. Gus moaned a response. I feel so bad for him, Claire said, looking at him. You needn't, dear. We'll be together again. I keep him company every day. He gets confused, but you can usually get a message through to comfort him when he becomes frightened. Of course, most of the nurses here think he's completely out to lunch. I'm sorry, that can't be easy, Claire said, squeezing her hand. How often does Paul come to see him now? Such a good boy. Even with all the stress he's under, worrying about you and taking care of the girls by himself, he still manages to see Gus every Wednesday around 3 o'clock. You really think I can get through to Paul? Claire asked. It's worth a try, dear, but he's not a believer. Claire knew she was right. Paul had never had any interest in the metaphysical. He had a great imagination unless it came to heaven or any kind of afterlife. He simply couldn't fathom it. She'd always attributed it to his being around too many surgeries. You're here and then you're not, he'd always say. He wouldn't even sit through a movie that hinted at such things, claiming it was wrong to play with people's emotions. Still, Claire knew she had to try. Would you meet me here at 2 o'clock every Wednesday and help me work with Gus, so I can try to reach Paul when he gets here? I'm always here. You can count on me, Lily said with a grin. Gus offered an impromptu recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. When he reached with liberty and justice for all, he added, You're here and then you're not. You're here and then you're there. Claire laughed and leaned down to kiss him goodbye. I knew you were in there, Gus. I'm putting my faith in you. Together, I know we can do this. I'll be back tomorrow to give it a shot, she said, straightening the collar in his pajama shirt. Suddenly she felt a maternal tug in her chest, like when a toddler's been quiet for far too long. Anna. Anna sat on her right hand at the end of her parents' bed, her stare cold and vacant as she twisted a lock of her hair. Claire's heart nearly bled at the sight. That poor hand's going to end up flat as a pancake for all the eyelashes it's plucked. Shocked by her appearance, Claire put her arms around her. You look so tired, so different. You stopped straightening your hair. And no more eyeliner by Crayola. Claire spoke to her with ease, more freely than she had in months. Your eyes have always been so beautiful, even with your sparse eyelashes. I always loved it when you let your hair go curly, even though you hated it. What's with the sweatpants and dirty t-shirt, Banana? Even when you aren't going anywhere, you make sure you're in full goth with stick-straight hair. It's like your uniform. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Claire stroked her daughter's hair, then she grasped Anna's hand and suddenly choked. The intensity of Anna's pain seemed to be concentrated in her hands and caught Claire by surprise. Heavy and bitter like soured milk. Such a different sensation from when she touched Paul. Anna, I'm here. Can't you feel me? Anna heard a single tick in the air, but ignored it as the waning afternoon sun streamed through her parents' bedroom window. It shone through a rainbow sun catcher, a Mother's Day gift. Ribbons of red, orange, and yellow washed over her shoulder and across her cheek. Mesmerized by her image reflected in the large mirror on her parents' dresser, she touched the colors on her face. It's almost December. It's been a whole month. How does someone just vanish? Impossible. If my mom's alive and free, I never really knew her. I thought she was completely tied to us, heart and soul. She'd call if there was any way possible. Then she's gone? Anna whispered to her reflection in the mirror. Not my mom. My mom was smart, strong. How could anyone take her anywhere? Are they coming back for us? I don't care. I don't care if they take me as long as I can see her again. I've got to find that purse or I'm going to lose my shit. Anna was exhausted from tossing and turning all night, haunted by purse dreams. She'd dreamt about the brown leather purse almost every night since her mother had vanished. Sometimes she dreamt it was sitting on the stairs. Her mom would simply walk out of the kitchen as if she'd been home the whole time, like it had been a colossal misunderstanding. She'd loved seeing her mom in her dreams. The hellish downside was that each time she awoke, she lost her all over again. Anna approached the large mirror and studied her eyes. She had her mom's eyes. Everyone had always said so. She frowned as a bit of her mom seemed to stare eerily out of her own reflection. Anna placed her hands on the dresser, leaned in close to the glass, and whispered, Mom, can you hear me? Where are you? Are you here? Yes, I'm here. I'm here, Claire grasped Anna's shoulders. Ah! Anna screamed and jumped away from the dresser. Dad, you scared the crap out of me. Just as startled, Paul slapped his hand against his chest. Sorry, I was looking for Shadow. Paul reached for her. He wanted to hug her, but she backed away from him, shaking and rubbing her arms. I think I'm going crazy. I'm not okay. I didn't even hear you come in, Anna warned. I should have said something. What do you mean you're not okay? I can't stand this. I have to know everything. If you know more than I do, you have to tell me right now. I mean it. Everything, Anna demanded, her fists clenched, trembling at her sides. We're falling apart here, aren't we? Come here, he said, sitting down and patting the edge of the bed. Anna walked past him to the head of the bed and yanked her mother's pillow out from under the comforter. She sat down next to him, hugging the pillow as she buried her face in it. Paul put his arm around her, pulled her close to him, and sighed as regret coursed through his veins. He'd been selfish with Claire's pillow, and now he wanted nothing more than a few gulps of her scent to be left for Anna, despite all the nights he'd fallen asleep clutching it. Claire's lavender bath soap had never been more of a comfort to him, and inhaling it directly from the bottle hadn't brought the same relief. She's still here, Anna said, lifting her face from her pillow. Some little part of her, as good as it feels to close my eyes and pretend she's standing right here, it still pisses me off. I know. We're just blowing in the wind. We don't know anything. Not much, Paul admitted. I can't take it anymore. Paul squeezed her shoulder. We all have questions, Anne. Tell me yours, he said, noticing for the first time that she seemed to have aged 5 years in the past month. The girl she had been had disappeared along with Claire. The funny thing was, Em seemed to be okay. Em was holding her own. She never cried. She just played with her dolls, went to school and swimming lessons, and sat with Shadow in front of the television watching Little Mermaid movies. She said she missed her mother on occasion, usually when Paul tucked her in for bed or laid her clothes out for school, but she never said those exact words. Instead, she'd say, I wish Mommy was here right now. To which Paul would always respond, me too, honey. Clearly, Em was managing her marbles just fine, better than anyone else. Where's her purse, Dad? You know she never went anywhere without it. I couldn't ask you before. I was too afraid. But I have to know. Just tell me, Anna pleaded. Paul heard a whimper escape her lips as he covered his face with his hands. He was about to pull his own daughter down into his bottomless pit. It felt so wrong. But it was too late. They were already tumbling down, down, down. Only he and the detective had known about the purse. To the police, it was simply evidence. To him, it was the enormous stone tied to his ankle, dragging him down to the very bottom of his life. No, Anna cried. She tugged on his sleeve. Please, Dad, no, she begged. It's with her. It has to be. He dropped his hands from his face and wiped his nose on his cuff. I know, he answered, choking back tears and shaking his head. Anna reasoned, if someone took her from us, she would have died trying to reach us, and if that's not what happened, it's because she never had a chance. Nothing else makes sense. If Mom wandered off because she was sick or something, someone would have found her by now. Like the police, the neighbors, someone. You know your mother, Paul agreed as he gathered his courage and looked into his daughter's eyes. For a moment he caught a glimpse of Claire and her furrowed brow. It was the old, you don't need a new lawnmower. There's nothing wrong with the old one look. Paul smiled and put his arm around her. Claire sat at their feet, crying uncontrollably, her arms wrapped around her knees as she rocked back and forth. Anna's hand trembled as she handed Claire's pillow to him. Paul lifted it to his face and inhaled, then set it down on the bed. The police have her purse. No, Anna argued. I'm sorry, honey. I found it in the Volkswagen. Everything was spilled out on the floor mats. I don't know what happened, but it wasn't like your mother to leave it all lying there like that. What the hell was I thinking? If I had just taken the damn thing with me, I would have had my ID when they found me. So, when do we stop pretending? Anna asked, her tone shifting from desperation back to anger. I don't know. There's no rule book. I guess I've been waiting for someone to tell me what comes next, Paul confessed. The police are just used to dealing with things like this, so I follow their lead and wait for them to tell me the next step. That Detective Robles doesn't seem to be able to come up with anything at all. She's relentless with her questions, but she almost seems embarrassed every time she calls or stops by for more. The purse is all we've got. No fingerprints, no witnesses. Your mom never showed up at the bank. She just vanished, he said, wiping his nose on his sleeve again. Anna placed her hand on his back. Let's take the next step. Let's do it on our own. I don't want to be told when to accept my own mom's gone. No one should be allowed to tell us that. We should have a memorial service or something. Maybe. Paul took one more whiff of Claire's pillow, stood up and tucked it back under the comforter. He gave it a pat and smoothed the covers over it, knowing you couldn't even begin to think about a memorial. Makes me sick, you having to grow up so fast like this. I'm okay. I'd rather grow up too fast and be kept in the dark. Promise me you'll tell me everything they tell you, Anna insisted. I don't know, honey. His voice trailed off. I'm serious, Dad. Even if they find... Paul walked across the room to the window and stared out into the street. Claire followed him. The neighbor kids were having a snowball fight. Had no idea that the world within the Cummings house had come to a screeching halt. All right. There's something else, he admitted, turning to her, folding his arms across his chest. What? Anna asked as she joined him at the window. The two of them turned and stared out onto the street, as if it would somehow make it easier. Dad, Anna finally whispered. Paul sighed. You know they impounded the Volkswagen as evidence, and the battery was dead when they went to tow it. They thought she might have walked somewhere. They brought these dogs over, tracked her scent all the way to the train station, right down to the platform. Someone had to have seen her. I know. They posted flyers down there. Still nothing. Detective Robles says there were dozens of leads on women in suits with dark hair, but everyone turned out to be someone else they were able to track down and identify. Plus, she said 10 times as many people took the train that day because of the plane crash. The Kennedy was closed half the day. Shit, Anna whispered. Shit, Claire echoed. The dogs weren't able to pick up her scent again on any of the railroad cars. Detective Robles says they might be able to pick it up again on land once the snow melts, but the odds are slim. This is nuts. Maybe she just snapped or hit her head or has amnesia or something. Maybe she was abducted by aliens. Your mom would never go to Mars without her purse. True. Anna smiled through her pain. Claire pounded her fist against her leg. There's got to be something I can do to help them. Struggling to remember some of the most intriguing jars in Wendy's shop, Claire jumped when she felt a tap on her shoulder. Before she could think, someone grabbed her and spun her around.